Over in the pages of Marvel Comics' main Amazing Spider-Man series, Norman Osborn's resolve has been tested. Norman has recently tried to shift from the villainous Green Goblin over to the heroic Gold Goblin, but Norman keeps getting tested by other villains throughout the Marvel Universe. Over in the pages of his Gold Goblin series, we got to see Norman's therapist Ashley Kafka take up the mantle of Queen Goblin and just destroy his mental health. At the end of the Gold Goblin comic book, Norman was forced to kill Ashley in order to save Spider-Man's life. But as we found out in the pages of a recent Amazing Spider-Man series, the Queen Goblin is back. My name is Erick, and today, let's go ahead and see how the Queen Goblin and her new accomplice, Kraven the Hunter, take down Spider-Man. But before we get deeper into the video, I want to encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting this like button over on our video. Two of Spider-Man's villains are forming the deadliest team-up he's ever had to face. But are they after Spidey? Or is he just in the way of something bigger? Patrick Gleason rejoins the Amazing Spider-Man crew for the darkest arc of the series yet. Amazing Spider-Man issue 32 is written by Zeb Wells, featuring art from Patrick Gleason, colors from Marcio Menyz, letters from VC's Joe Caramagna. We also have a page written from Jonathan Hickman, specially for the G.O.D.S over in this issue. That page is colored by Erick Arciniega and illustrated by Patrick Gleason as well. The entire issue is lettered from VC's Joe Caramagna, and the cover for the issue is coming in over from John Romita Jr., Scott Hanna, and Morry Hollowell. Really like the way that John Romita Jr. is able to depict both Kraven and Queen Goblin, looking a little bit smaller over on this cover. The way that they both kind of antagonize Peter on this cover too, with him kind of using his Spidey sense to see them behind him, I think showcases the surprising comedic tone of this issue shockingly well. And I want to extend a quick thank you over to Adventures in Poor Taste. And let's kick this issue off by showcasing some of the artwork over from Patrick Gleason on this issue. Really thought Gleason lent something really special over to the pages of Amazing Spider-Man. Sometimes I think artist John Romita Jr. has a difficult time catching the more silly and irreverent moments over in Zeb Wells' script, and man, I thought Patrick Gleason just did a fantastic job getting some strong reaction shots and really showcasing the deadly and violent nature of this current arc over in The Amazing Spider-Man. I love this page that we have up on the screen showcasing Kraven's powered up spear thanks to his new accomplice with Ashley Kafka, the Queen Goblin here. And the first page of the issue, I think, did a good job introducing some of the elements of their relationship through captions and narration. It's really interesting how this book kind of switches between a silly and serious tone depending directly on which page you're on. I thought this next page over in The Amazing Spider-Man was absolutely perfect, changing up the tone of the issue really dramatically and switching things up with these white panel borders instead of these black ones. This really gives Patrick Gleason the chance to utilize some negative space here, and I think this panel over with Felicia bleeding out of the page here is just beautiful. And the way that the rest of the page is designed with these five really small, boxy panels really caught my interest. I think Patrick Gleason just does a great job adapting Zeb Wells' script in some really visually interesting ways throughout this series as well. This page that we have up on the screen actually introduces Peter's status quo in the issue, as Peter is actually going on a date over with one of Janice's friends, Michelle. And I think Gleason just does a great job capturing the interpersonal nature between this meal of Michelle and Peter here. Learning some of the ways that Michelle ties back into the story and how she kind of interpreted some of the events of the last issue was thrilling here. And I think Gleason's work in the issue did such a good job selling some of these scenes because the dialogue here was written incredibly well, but it's those nuanced facial expressions that I think make these talking head scenes still seem interesting in a book that's filled with some kind of pulse-pounding action towards some of the final moments here. And one of the last pages over with Peter and Michelle, the amount of panels on the screen, I think do a great job showcasing just how awkward but interesting Peter can be in some of these certain moments. Also, the tension between these two kind of dials up as the date progresses here. So, really interested to see if this is something that Peter is going to pursue, or if some of the roadblocks that Zeb Wells levied over in this issue will stop this relationship before it's really able to take off over in earnest here. I thought Felicia's comments over on Peter's date were really interesting in the issue, and also makes me wonder if Zeb Wells is really looking to close the door on the relationship between Peter and Felicia, or if things are just taking a temporary break. I feel like a lot of people were really quick to call the fact that Felicia and Peter broke up in the last issue of The Amazing Spider-Man, and I really thought that that would have been a throwaway sequence just because of the amount of time Zeb Wells has spent building up Felicia and Peter's relationship. So I'm really hoping that Wells has something interesting coming just down the pike in a couple issues that we still don't anticipate yet. And another really intriguing element of the series that I think brought in the dark nature of the comic book that the solicit was teasing was how the Queen Goblin and Kraven are both looking to pursue not only Spider-Man but Norman Osborn in this issue. Just like Otto Octavius, we have yet another villain in this comic book series who is trying to revert Norman Osborn back to a villain here. I love how so many different people are kind of pulling on those plot threads and might end up influencing Norman in one way or another between some of these moments. And I also thought that the way Gleason renders the Spider-Man suit is just a little bit different than some of these other artists. I think the way he kind of captures those more animated lines and the way Marcio Menyz captures some of the colors in the issue are quite vivid and beautiful here. The future issues of Amazing Spider-Man were teasing this big arc where Peter is actually becoming the aggressor. And I really thought the way Wells was able to utilize these elements of both Kraven and the Queen Goblin to get to this final kind of storyline hook was really, really thrilling in the tale. We've had this storyline of Norman's sins dangling for such a long time in the background of this core Amazing Spider-Man series. The fact that Zeb Wells is still touching on some of those elements to craft the future plot for The Amazing Spider-Man shows me just how strong of a writer he is. And I think it's really cool when you look at how Ashley was introduced so much earlier to this run, and how the Goblin series brought some plot threads back into the book to strengthen it as well. I think it's just fascinating to see how this current run of Amazing Spider-Man is not only bolstered by previous issues in the series, but by other titles like Goblin as well. At the end of the day here, I just thought this was a really, really fun issue of The Amazing Spider-Man. It was really thrilling to see Zeb Wells head into a bit of a darker direction over for this run, and I thought that some of the camaraderie between the Queen Goblin and Kraven was super, super interesting. I am so struck by the sheer amount of plot threads that this comic book is working with, and I think still the core of this series as it stands is Peter's relationship with Norman, and the way this book ends up testing it and showing how Peter's going to be reacting over to this situation and scenario, I think really showcases the immense talent that Zeb Wells has for spinning these scripts. Also, I think the artwork here from Patrick Gleason is really able to tap into the comedic nature that Wells is trying to evoke from this series in certain moments, as well as capture that really violent nature for the series that's going to spin into what the solicit teases is one of the darkest arcs of this series yet. I want to know from you, are you still as excited for The Amazing Spider-Man as I am? What were some of your thoughts on the dark team-up between Kraven and Queen Goblin over in Amazing Spider-Man 32? Thanks so much for coming to check out our video, and we'll be back really soon to cover the next steps of the Queen Goblin, the Goblin, and the Marvel Universe. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.